Hi, today I'm going to be answering question 1. How does your product use or challenge conventions, and how does it represent social groups or issues? So, in the early stages of my research, I looked into the codes and conventions of a coming-of-age drama, what was commonly explored in each coming-of-age film, as well as hegemonic stereotypes that they tend to rely on. As a result of this research, we discovered that the genre is often set in isolated locations. We chose to include an isolated location as it helps streamline the narrative and allows focus on the one central story and protagonist over numerous subplots. By showing only the 3 girls, we're positioning the audience to acknowledge and understand the isolation surrounding them as a result of their waning friendship, thus enhancing the tension that begins to crawl into the opening. We feel issues and friendships are prevailing in younger people, giving our target audience something to relate to in line with Blummer and Katz's uses and gratification theory, which states audiences seek personal identity, relatability, and entertainment from their media. Where coming-of-age drama tend to follow chronologically and follow a linear narrative structure, sometimes with flashbacks to emphasize or reveal either a past equilibrium or to reveal the initial disruption, we wanted to challenge Todorov's theory, and did so as our opening is non-linear, starting in the present to create enigma and encourage audience engagement through having them guess what might have happened and what might have gone on prior to that moment. This utilizes Barth's Enigma code, hooking the audience as there is practically no immediate equilibrium. Showing Davina sullenly resting before she walks nervously, they will hopefully wish to know how the girls came to this situation and what will happen after. We follow most conventions and themes typical of a coming-of-age film, as it follows disruption to friendships, though the subject of death may not be as common in the genre amongst friendship groups. Often it's the loss of a family member that triggers the action and angst that the film follows. We also didn't include any romantic aspects, which are typical in the coming-of-age drama, as we wanted it to revolve around the tumultuous relationship between the girls, without the distractions a romantic partner could offer. This is a powerful feminist message that is supposed to challenge the common trope that girls should rely on romantic relationships for stability and meaning. POV shots are not unusual for coming-of-age films. However, having tried a POV shot, we chose to cut this moment as we felt it cut the feeling of continuity. Instead, we chose to immediately establish our protagonist in the first shot through a medium close-up, with her coming into focus and the camera remaining on her for a fair portion of time in order to establish her as the protagonist, but also allowing the audience to have time to identify relatable aspects like her age, her clothes, her mood. These are all things we wanted our audiences to identify in order to help them connect with her, as they too may relate to her, her style, her age, and her mood. The use of medium close-up allowed audiences to clearly see mood. Traditionally, close-ups are used for this. Whilst also gauging personality through clothing colour, period through style, and establishing the overall tone of our coming-of-age drama. Dark. We included panning shots to allow the audience to gain an idea on the surroundings, which help portray the film's genre and tone. The camera follows after Davina for a fair amount of time, but it also helps to convey what the other girls mean to her. Anytime Vivian is on camera, she's making some sort of unkind remark. On the other hand, Rebecca is almost always comforting Davina in some form, emphasizing their closeness while making the audience sympathize for their friendship. Also connects with the viewers, as they may be able to relate to having to comfort a friend in some way, and if the audience didn't feel some level of connection, the death of Rebecca wouldn't leave as deep an impact. For editing, we use contrasting colour schemes for different times in the film. For the first half, where the girls seem to be in relative harmony, the colours are warm and soft, evoking a cozy-ish atmosphere. Once the real disruption begins and the argument breaks out, the colours turn cold and uninviting. This is utilised by a staple of coming-of-age dramas. For instance, The Virgin Suicides opens with everything swathed in hues of soft orange, yet once it pans to inside the house, everything is a pale, stony bluish colour, presenting a contrast of the tranquility people outside the home feel as they get on with their day-to-day lives, and the enigmatic pain the girls inside the home are experiencing. Often, coming-of-age films are set in more rural areas, on the urban fringes of cities or suburban areas, meaning there's plenty of nature around. The diegetic sounds of the film proving that. We too followed the notion of being in a peaceful, calm place of nature, which only enhances the lack of peace in the group. Non-diegetic soundtracks for these kinds of areas also mimic the tranquility with soothing, pleasant music one could fall asleep to. We followed this without a doubt. The music in our opening is slow paced and acoustic, although it does have slightly melancholy undertones. Many aspects to the mise-en-scène, like Davina's room and the things inside there, the various outside shots, which may be a bit overwhelming within the first watch to fully appreciate them, but the immediate deep immersion makes Rebecca's death all the more memorable. As previously stated, soft and defined colour palettes were utilised, as well as joyful, childlike, nostalgic imagery, like when the girls are running and spinning, smiling happily like a young child would. This is typical in coming-of-age dramas. For instance, I Believe in Unicorns, that uses a lot of the same type of imagery. The non-verbal communication is typical in coming-of-age dramas, used when something can't be said, and we too use this, mainly with Vivian, though I'll speak on this more later. We followed the stylized colour grading, once again very typical of coming-of-age films, for instance, as previously stated, The Virgin Suicides and I Believe in Unicorns, as it really encapsulates what people are feeling, like the warm colours for happiness and blue colours for melancholy or sadness. After a few moments of setting the scene, most coming-of-age films present a title card in the opening. We wanted to include the different handwritings to help establish that there are 3 different characters, each with differing personalities. And we follow the convention typical for this drama, though not all coming-of-age films use this. I was directly inspired by the coming-of-age film The Virgin Suicides, though I changed it to fit our own film's protagonists, as they too include handwritings of different fonts from each of the sisters. We also received some inspiration from the film Saltburn, as they utilised an animation of the title to create visual appeal for the audience. So I did do an animation of each different handwriting, because I wasn't really sure of any other way to do this. We wanted the medium close-up in the opening to establish the protagonist, while the sinking teabag foreshadows events to come, Rebecca's death. Davina is also the only character to have defining shots that only she is in, except for the last shot of Rebecca being dragged from the lake. This simultaneously perpetuates Davina's importance to the story and Rebecca's importance to her, while also noting on Vivian's cruelty and how it has made Davina subconsciously distance herself from her, and therefore the cameras distance themselves from her. With editing, we exploited the deep and heavy connotations of a blackout. The subtext of them could invoke the audience to begin to fully understand the overwhelming loss felt by Davina over Rebecca's death. The various shots of nature throughout were in place to gift box the setting for the audience. The light, dreamy shots are a nice reflection of a more tranquil moments the girls faced whilst running away. They are also put in to be a stark contrast to the blackouts, as if perhaps Rebecca didn't die, there would be instead another peaceful shot of nature. The colour grading was used to create stark contrast between the before and after of the climax, with warm orangey tones beforehand and icy blues after. These are also similar to the colour schemes of Davina and Vivian themselves, showing how after the death, Vivian got her way. The long takes at the end that we implemented were supposed to portray the disbelief and denial felt by Davina, and how this will no doubt have a long-term effect on her psyche. The serene, restful, non-diegetic music played as Davina sets out to fight her friends mirrors the placid countryside, while its pensive undercurrent offers a minute inkling of issues that have occurred in the past and will most certainly occur in the future. The slightly more upbeat music as the trio run joyfully was in place to dampen the tense emotions previously brought up and lull the audience sort of into a false sense of security, making the next events all the more startling and unexpected. The narration from Davina was necessary in providing the audience with context, for instance about her mother, and converting her feelings to the situation. Visual qualities such as clothing and makeup were what we used to represent their personalities. Davina wore floral colours and minimal makeup to represent her soft, calm personality, the pale colours reflecting somewhat her innocence and naivety. Rebecca wore a fake band t-shirt to show her loyalty to things she cares for, and Vivian wears layered clothes with blues to present her hidden, cold identity. Lakes are often used to be places of confinement and contemplation, yet also sadness. We use subtle foreshadowing of Rebecca's death when Davina drops the teabag and it sinks. We wanted the water, while being a symbol of freedom and lack of restraint, to also show how they're doing something without thinking of the real consequences. The expression of the characters throughout the opening are blatant when presenting emotion. Vivian's dirty looks to Davina and cruel stares at Rebecca show her self-restraint around her hateful attitude is dwindling. If we had the chance to fully flesh out the film and not only make an opening, this would have been elaborated on further. For representations and following stereotypes, it depends on stereotypes. For instance, Rebecca is presented with black clothes and studded accessories, which make her outwardly appear vicious and angry, much like the typical stereotype of more alternative people. Yet her interactions with Davina show her care towards her friend and her distaste towards rudeness. With Vivian, we wanted to challenge the typical warm colour scheme stereotype of warm red colours showing the antagonist. Throughout media and time itself, red is the typical colour of evil, from the biblical Antichrist Satan to the original design of DC's Harley Quinn. We wanted to challenge this predisposition that people who wore pale colours and blues are harmless. Though we did utilise this to make Vivian a different kind of villain to the fiery brutes clad in red, making her attacks, for the most part, backhanded and more psychological. In a way, we subverted Prop's character types, emphasising typical protagonist character traits in Rebecca instead of Davina, who was the true protagonist, making her death all the more surprising, as it would likely be more expected for her to survive. Rebecca and Vivian are shown to be foils of each other, and we don't follow the typical convention of the protagonist winning, as Rebecca dies, meaning the antagonist got her way. We sort of follow the convention of teenagers being naive, as they did choose to run away, without backpacks at that. Yet Rebecca does seem to have some level of maturity in the way she subtly comforts Davina, and Davina's monologues of contemplation sound quite grown up, considering her age. We do follow some gender stereotypes. Both Davina and Vivian wear feminine dresses and light makeup, both with their hair down, but Rebecca does subvert this somewhat. She wears black clothing and studs, a fair amount less stereotypically feminine than the other two. She does wear makeup, though it's significantly darker when compared to her friends. We followed a portion of the main conventions in a coming-of-age drama genre, with the inclusion of friendships and the breaking down of said relationships, and obviously the pinnacle of coming-of-age, an adolescent protagonist. With there being a wide spectrum of different coming-of-age film tones, it's quite difficult to subvert any feelings, as for the most part in one coming-of-age film at least they've been covered. As it's only the opening, we're unable to flesh out and explore the family dynamics between each character and their relatives, but with Davina, she does mention her mother and past feelings of relief at the thought of not seeing her again, introducing a hint of tension between them, which would hopefully drive the audience into wanting to watch more. The main issue in this film opening that's covered would be bullying, though the audience is only granted a small hint of Vivian's cruelty towards Davina in the beginning. Since the first time she's physically introduced, she's bitter towards the girl, making it blatantly clear her true nature. Past problems between the two are hinted at when Davina receives a message, and her demeanour becomes visibly more tense, even distressed. It's clear that to an extent, at some point, Davina is scared of Vivian. Isolation is also an issue covered. For some parts, it's only subtle, like Davina sitting alone in her room, staring at a glass. Then her walking, once again, alone and looking apprehensive. The lack of any other characters being introduced, only the trio, secludes and encapsulates them. The audience likely acknowledges the lack of any of the girls' guardians, making them seem almost neglected. Thank you for listening.